All right, everybody, this is In Liberty and Health. I got the great Geoffrey Verity Schofield. Did I say your name right? Please tell me I said your name right.
Close. Schofield.
Ah, oh my God, I'm terrible. I love technology right now because we're communicating from literally across the world. It's 8 o'clock your time at night.
Yep.
Yeah, and I just took my dogs for their morning walk, so it's pretty cool. Give a brief introduction to yourself, and you kind of just blew up on YouTube recently. I saw you just hit 50,000 subscribers, so kind of give like a brief background of what got you there and what brought you into the health and fitness world.
I've sort of had a weird journey because I didn't get into fitness like right out of college or anything. Like I don't have a degree in exercise science or anything physiology related. My degree is actually in economics of all things. And, I didn't really even start lifting until I was like 25 years old.
Oh
So it's sort
wow.
of been an unusual journey. I don't have any like personal trainer certifications. I don't have any degrees related to fitness at all. And, you know, sometimes people ask me like, oh, why are you qualified to do this? I'm not. I'm not. I'm just a guy making videos. And I think, that's where the internet can be good, but can also be bad because it's good where you can educate yourself and you can learn a lot. You might not necessarily need to get a formal degree to be fairly knowledgeable in a general sense about a topic. I mean, I'm not an expert about any particular area of fitness, but I know a decent amount about a wide variety of topics. And you can do that just through YouTube, through Google searches, reading PubMed studies, talking to people. There's a lot of resources out there, books, lots of stuff you can do to just self-educate without having, a formal quote unquote education in the field. The bad part is that anyone can put out content. So
All
you
right.
do get people who they just skip the education side of things and then they go right to posting, their opinion or phrasing their opinion as science
Mhm.
or as, truth, where, maybe they haven't actually learned very much about exercise or anatomy or biomechanics or physiology or just the research or even just not the science side of things, but just like common sense. For some of these, influencers, common sense is sort of left the building.
Mhm.
And if you're new to fitness, if you're a beginner, you might not know who is legit and who is full of shit.
Right.
Because how would you know if you
Mhm.
don't have that basic knowledge? If I went to an art museum and some guy started talking to me about art and was like, "Oh, this is the greatest. Oh, this piece is shit. I don't know why it's in the museum. This one is fantastic, and it's just abstract art. Looks the same to me. Like I have no idea."
Right.
Then there's some other guy, like a real expert, who can actually tell you, what's up and why this is good and why this is bad. I wouldn't know because I don't have that basic knowledge in art, and it takes years to get to that base of knowledge where you can actually see if someone is full of shit. And it's a fine line in fitness, right? Like some of the stuff. Here's an example. I'm not sure if you're familiar with knees over toes guy,
Yes, very
Ben
familiar.
Patrick. Yeah, yeah. So his stuff is great,
Mhm.
but his stuff looks kind of similar to like bullshit Instagram workouts or TikTok videos where it's just no one
Right.
should ever do that.
Yeah.
Like I can tell that it's legit because, I've learned a lot about it. Um, but if you don't have any knowledge in the field, that looks kind of similar to something that is going to be completely ineffective or even dangerous.
Mhm.
So it is a fine line, and it's really tough to assess content without consuming a lot of content first and
Yeah.
finding some trusted sources and being able to evaluate it through there. It takes years. It takes years. And this is why a lot of beginners, they get led down the wrong path because they just see some shredded dude with abs. They assume he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah,
Well,
take my supplement and you'll look like me tomorrow.
yeah, yeah. Then there's the financial incentives,
Mhm.
and a lot of people just they're walking pieces of human garbage, basically. And so they'll sell out their audience, dick over their audience and sell out at any opportunity. You know, they'll build an audience and then just screw them over later. And sometimes their audience is okay with it. They're strangely happy to get lied to and screwed over. And, you know, there's definitely some channels or some communities that have some cult-like aspects to it.
Yeah.
Where if you show them the truth, they get pissed at you. They get angry for you saying, hey, like, you know, your hero is kind of screwing you over. They're like, oh, how dare I go? No, you're the bad person, that kind of thing.
Right. But
So,
well, because they assume you're attacking they think you're attacking their identity, right? So like, to give like a brief background for myself, and I've talked about it a little bit on the show, but I did carnivore for literally 2 years. And then about 8 months ago, I started using Carbon Diet Coach because I was listening to these kind of charlatans, right? And so they say good stuff every here and there, but if you don't know anything, then it's hard to separate the wheat from the chaff, right? So you listen to someone like Dave Asprey, some of the longevity stuff, it's like, okay, but then like a majority of it is complete and total snake oil. And that dude will do anything to sell his supplements. Paul Saladino, sometimes he says good stuff and then he's way off in the weeds. And you know, he takes these mechanistic studies that show a like proof of concept where like, okay, well, this sucralose, the sweetener, oxalates, looks bad. This is bad for you. But what he never tells you is that in these rodent studies that they do, and this is the same deal with like aspartame, they'll take these ridiculous amounts, that you'll never get day to day, and then extrapolate that and say, oh yeah, it's going to kill you. So where do you fall when it comes to like these kind of, I guess we'll start with like the carnivore and keto side. What's your take on carnivore and keto?
Yeah, so I actually watched your episode with Dr. Mike. It was a month ago or 2 months ago, maybe longer, I forget. And so you went through a bit of your diet history there, which was interesting.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where a very small segment of the population can do fine on keto,
right?
And an even smaller can do fine on carnivore. What percentage is that? I'm not sure. And it's also going to be a little bit of variation. Like anyone can do keto, right? Like it's just a natural physiological state, which is sort of what they use in the advertising. Oh, this is like peak human performance. Like this is how we're meant to be all the time.
Right.
It's like a plan B. It's a backup for when we don't have the source of energy that we want.
Right.
And, you know, you can subsist and survive in that state. It's better than dying. But I don't know. Call me crazy. I'd rather thrive than survive. And I found that I get a lot of mileage from carbohydrates, especially if I am doing higher volume training. And the energy requirements for lifting are not super high. But if you're active throughout the day and you want to gain weight and you have a good amount of muscle and you're trying to build muscle and you're trying to gain weight and you have a fast metabolism and you have a low appetite, I mean, it's hard to just meet your caloric requirements with no carbs, especially when you reduce appetite. Like you'll tend to, and again, there's individual variation. Some people do really well on keto. You know, it's good in some ways. It's good for fat loss. Typically, you know, the more fat you have to lose, the easier it is to lose fat, and the easier it is to consume fewer carbohydrates.
I don't know what it is. My computer or something might be cursed because I keep having connectivity issues. So you were kind of, I asked your opinion on keto and carnivore, and we were kind of right in the middle of explaining kind of how on a ketogenic diet, because you're eating overall less calories because you're basically eliminating a food group, that might be a little bit easier for people to lose weight. So I guess we'll just try to kind of pick up from where we left off there.
Yeah, so I'm much more open to keto rather than carnivore, just because you can actually get in a wide variety of vegetables, which are time and time again shown to provide a multitude of health benefits. It's one of the few things that the vast majority of nutritionists and dietitians actually agree on. Not much, but it's vegetables. Like most people say, hey, yeah, like eat meat, don't eat meat, but like get in your vegetables. It's a good idea. The research is very, very clear on that. And so I would say for most people, carnivore, not a great idea. Doesn't help with the going, with everything moving through as well for most people.
Yeah.
Unless, like, I mean, there's really very little reason to not eat vegetables.
Right.
Unless you have like a really hardcore autoimmune disease or something. I know Michaela Peterson, in some ways, it's a little bit irresponsible to have a very rare personal condition that doesn't allow you to eat vegetables. And then you're like, oh, no one should eat, like, don't eat vegetables. Like, oh, here's this diet where other people shouldn't eat vegetables too.
Yeah.
Like, if you
So
have your own specific condition,
right.
it's one thing.
I'm glad you brought this up because this is kind of like fitness influencers at large. This gets at a bigger point, is that it's kind of like kids with dynamite, right? You're literally telling people this extreme, and yes, it may help some people, but now I did carnivore for 2 years, and some of my friends were coming up to me and asking me about it, thinking this is the way to go. And I, at one point, irresponsibly told them, yeah, it's the way to go. Oh, all these vegetables are bad for you. And then, like, kind of looking back at that, I'm like, I was a child with dynamite. I was running around, irresponsibly telling people bad advice when, people have been told eat less, move more for the longest time, and they didn't quite understand what that meant in its entirety. You have to eat more satiating foods and higher protein and lose weight at a reasonable pace rather than just wanting to sprint to the finish line. Like, if you do carnivore, you're going to lose a ton of water weight. So it's going to be very rewarding initially because your glycogen stores are going to be empty. And then you're going to eat so few calories, and meat is very satiating. So it's going to be an easy way to lose a bunch of weight. But what are the tail end costs of that? I would much rather see, someone lose 20 pounds over a year than 20 pounds in 3 months, right? That's a much more healthier transition. And it's not sexy to say that.
Yeah, it's one of those things where carbs get a bad rap because of the water retention issue.
Right.
So yeah, you cut carbs, you lose 5-10 pounds in a week even. And it's like, oh wow, like carbs are the enemy. Like it's insulin is the enemy. The insulin army on YouTube and on social media, to me, I find that to be very weird because yeah, if you have high insulin, it does mechanistically make it harder to lose fat in that instant, but it's the long-term caloric deficit or surplus which is going to be what actually matters. Insulin can't store something that's not there. It seems like really fucking obvious, but it's like you can have high insulin, and it's been shown like more insulinogenic foods, like milk, dairy, etc. Those don't necessarily lead to more weight gain if you equate the calories.
Exactly.
And then you even look at like, what do professional natural bodybuilders do to get diced, shredded, ripped, like 4, 5, 6% body fat? Most of them eat a decent amount of carbs during prep. Not going to be 400 grams a day, but it's, often 150 to 200. Usually they have the mentality of trying to keep carbs as high as possible while still losing fat. So you hit your protein, you get in enough fat for hormonal purposes, etc. And then, you fill up the rest with carbs, because especially if you're training hard, those are going to be very, very useful. And then, you can still get shredded while eating a pretty decent number of carbs. I'm sure there's been guys they've had carbs in the 300s and gotten absolutely diced. If you're active, you can get away with that. And so it's not the insulin, it's the deficit or the surplus. Then you have enhanced lifters who are literally injecting insulin and getting shredded as well. So if insulin was so fattening, how is any of this possible?
Right.
And, it's a very easy thing to debunk, but these doctors, they're making millions selling this sort of insulin is the enemy, carbs are the enemy kind of thing. And it can work, right? Again, like it can work, but it's working for the wrong reasons, right? People don't understand why it's working. It's because they're at a caloric deficit. That's why they're actually, losing weight, and again, that appetite suppressing effect is pretty nice, but it's certainly not the only way to go. And it's sometimes infuriating interacting with these people because, you tell them very clearly and they're just like, insulin, carbs. Like it just, it's like talking to a brick wall sometimes.
Yeah, dude, absolutely. And to go back to the, metaphor of children with dynamite, they tell people like fat is good, fat is good, fat is good. Okay, yes, but like, where do these calories go, right? Because fat is 9 calories per gram. So if you're chugging butter, if you got, a whole heaping teaspoon of MCT oil powder and you're putting your coffee, and you're drinking that, and then you eat the fattiest ribeye you can, slathered in, coconut oil and butter and olive oil, that fat has to go somewhere, right? It's not the amount of fat burned, it's the amount of fat stored. If you are taking in, 500 grams of fat and 20 grams of protein, well, where's that fat go if you can't, if you're not burning those calories off? And it's so funny when you see people that are just stuck in this fat, 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 fat. And that was kind of what I got annoyed with in the carnivore space. I would constantly see people just hammering, oh, you got to be chugging fat. You got to be having so much fat. And it's like, okay, well, why don't you like, they would eat 5,000 calories of, brisket and the most fattiest cuts of meat they could get. And then they'd have like one blueberry. And then they'd say, oh my God, this blueberry made me gain 5 pounds. Like, no, it's probably other calories from fat.
Yeah, no, it's like you'll burn more fat, but you're also eating so much fat that you're just burning the fat that you're eating, and you're not actually burning body fat. And people say like, oh, if insulin is not high, fat can't be stored. That's bullshit. It can absolutely be stored. It's like, it's very, very, very easy to store fat. Fat does not have a high thermic effect of food, so it's like 3% of the energy. Some different forms of fat take a little bit different, but on average, it's like 3 or 4% of the energy in the fat is required to break down the fat. It's higher for carbs, much higher for protein. And so at the end of the day, like, I would say balance is just best. Vilifying or cutting out any macronutrient is really not the way to go for most people. And again, it can work, but at what cost? Now you can't eat foods that are very healthy because they have a few grams of carbs, or you can't enjoy a piece of birthday cake or something like that because, oh my God, the carbs. Whereas flexible dieting is definitely the way to go for most people, and that has problems too, right? Like that can get out of hand where now you're only eating Pop-Tarts and protein powder. And I think for most people, just like stick to a healthy, natural diet, whole foods. Don't overeat, eat satiating foods. And all these diets are just backlash against the hyper palatable, super high calorie junk foods and the super high portion sizes, as well as people being sedentary. Mm-hmm. All these diets, like they have different paths to where people want to be, a caloric deficit, but they're all sort of reacting against the same thing. But the diets don't tell you that, because they're just like, oh, this is the solution. Well, the solution to what? They're all the solution to the same thing. Plus, there's so much individual variation that different people are going to have their own solution. The diets don't talk about that either. It's just, oh, this is the diet because #marketing, and that's the best way to sell something, branded as like the best thing for everyone. Because if you throw in some nuance, you lose people because they're normies and they can't understand, hey, the best diet doesn't exist and it's going to be individual. So, it's kind of frustrating talking to people who don't sometimes have like a base of knowledge with nutrition or diet or training or something like that. They just want to be spoon fed, no pun intended, the correct answer. And then when you're like, well, you might have to experiment a little bit. They're just like, nope, I'm out. I don't want to have to like put in any kind of mental effort into this stuff. Just put me in a wheelchair and cart me to where I need to go, basically. But it's going to take work. And so, people have to realize self-experimentation with N=1 being yourself, is going to be super, super valuable and absolutely crucial.
Right. I 100% agree. And you mentioned listening to my interview with Mike Israetel, and I think I might have elaborated on this a little bit, but I had kind of told him, the thing with carnivore, I'd be good for 2 weeks and then I would binge. But what I never understood about that in those 2 years is that this is just a reaction to my body freaking starving, is that I wasn't eating enough throughout the week. And it sounds almost silly to say, you have to eat more to lose weight. But, okay, if you eat more throughout the week, then you don't have to clump all your calories in one day and eliminate all the progress from that week. So kind of moving on here, though, it seems like everybody wants to demonize sugar and saturated fat. Um, my outlook on this, and I want your perspective on this, is that they're only bad insofar as they cause people to overconsume because they're not satiating. So sugar by itself is not satiating. Saturated fat by itself is not satiating. So when you put these into foods, especially together, they're so easy to overconsume. You know, you look at donuts, French fries, you know, burgers with buns, and all these other different hyperpalatable foods. They're all high in carbohydrates and fat, saturated fat, and sugar. And
The Burger King, Burger King guy.
nice, yeah, but you know, you can have them, but you should probably try to not have them together, and maybe limit it if you feel like it's going to make you overconsume. So what's your thoughts surrounding like saturated fat and sugar? Do you think it's like the chicken or the egg? Do you think they're inherently bad, or you just think it's because the non-satiating effect?
Yeah, so if they put you into caloric surplus, that's probably going to be the biggest thing. And your body fat percentage, which is going to be a huge indication of chronic inflammation, that is going to be where a lot of these diseases come from. It is, yeah, it's partly the diet, but it's like what it actually does to your body and the visceral fat that accumulates and the fatty liver, all these other things that cause the issue. It's not necessarily the foods themselves, although, you know, there's sort of a dual effect as well. Now, when it comes to sugar, certainly there are some people that I've seen where, you know, maybe this is where the anabolic diet is a response to this, to where they have a sweet tooth. And, you know, sugar is like, or sweet foods are something that it hits different, right? Like it's, yeah, maybe even if you equate the calories, it's just easier to overeat. There's also a dopamine issue where it's very rewarding.
Right.
And so you also have to look at the psychological side of things, which I think a lot of people overlook. And it's not as simple as just saying calories in, calories out. Because like, if it was that simple, it wouldn't be an issue in the first place. Like, if someone is really struggling with their weight and with fat loss, you know, just telling them to put the fork down, or most of them know it's calories in, calories out. Most of them know, like, hey, if you eat less, you lose weight. It's more an execution issue. And yeah, that might include cutting out some foods some of the time. I think it's best to have, you know, again, a flexible approach. But yeah, it's a tricky situation. And if you look at, you know, the data on how many diets actually succeed, from what I've seen, it varies based on the study. I've seen as high as like 97% of diets fail.
Right.
I've seen like down to 90. I've seen, it depends on what you define success as, right? Like if you diet down 10% of your body weight and then you go up 1%, is that failing? I mean, you're better off than you were, but it's a tricky situation. And we do know that the majority of diets fail, right? And I don't think it's as simple as, hey, you know, swap these foods for these, because, you know, if you cut them out entirely, now you have if you're restricting this food group, now you want this, and then you binge. And then you have a subset of people who are just maintaining too lean of a physique.
Right.
This is specifically in the fitness industry, which I've seen quite a bit. People will be damn near 10% body fat, and then they're binging. That's your body telling you to go up in body fat percentage typically.
Right.
And if you go up a little bit, usually your body's like, all right, like, cool, now we're fine. And, you know, the binging solves itself. If someone is above 20% body fat for a man, I would say that's less of an issue. And I would not say that gaining body fat is the answer there. But the closer someone is to 10% and the more shredded they are, yeah, that's where you might want to actually gain weight, right? And again, with the obesity epidemic, the idea of gaining body fat, people think it's always bad. They think it's like heading in the wrong direction. But for some people, like that's the way to go. If someone, you know, they've been doing full volume eating, they've been maintaining a very shredded physique, maybe they're on social media or they consume a lot of social media content, they might be maintaining too lean of a physique, and they might want to actually gain weight if they can. For some people, it's hard to gain weight because, you know, they see the shoulder striations and the abs and everything, and it's addictive. It's literally addictive, you know. And I've been there. A lot of people who I've talked to have been there. and it can be a struggle to gain weight. And that's, sort of the opposite problem that the general population has. And so, you do have to take an individual approach. Habits are huge. Food environment is huge.
Yes.
Discipline is less huge, but still important. But you're going to have to become a totally different person for most people, especially if they've been overweight or obese or morbidly obese their whole life. You're going to have to become a new person, like a totally new person, new environment, new habits, maybe new friends, maybe new people that you spend time with. Education is helpful, but it's certainly not everything.
Yeah.
I would say it's more execution than education.
Mm-hmm.
Education is important, but it certainly is not enough to get the job done. And this is where sometimes, it's tough as a coach because these habits are hard to change.
Yeah.
And, people do regress, and then all right, well, let's change this. And there's a formula for everyone, but it's really a struggle, especially if someone has been on the wrong path for like 20 or 30 years, and now they're trying to change, and it's not gonna be a year for most people, right? Like, it's, as you said, it's better to do it slower. And often, if you try to change quickly, you just ricochet in the opposite direction. Now you're plus 5 pounds or plus 10 pounds where you started. And then you have the healthy at any weight or healthy at any size movement, which is like, I empathize. I understand where it comes from.
Yeah.
Because, after you've been told you should be skinnier, and after you've been told about the health consequences, and after it's, you've fought and you've struggled and you failed a bunch of times, the reaction is just to say, fuck it. Fuck it, I'm just going to be fat, right? Like, I'm going to embrace it. And here's this movement which tells me I'm beautiful. And it's almost all women, actually. There's not many men who are like, I'm healthy at any size. It's like 95% women or more.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. But I understand where they're coming from, but it's kind of a lie as well, because it's very clear that being morbidly obese is not great for your body. Like, we have a lot of data on this. And again, these people who are selling that comforting lie, comforting lies, easy to sell. Uncomfortable truths, not that easy to sell. Trust me, I try to sell uncomfortable truths. Not making millions, doing all right, but certainly, people gravitate and will certainly spend money on stuff that is, claims to be easy rather than the reality.
Right, absolutely. And this is kind of what made me reject the guys who actually kind of tell the truth, at least in my opinion. And I'll throw this to you here in a second, but guys like Stan Efferding, I really like Stan because he takes a very, very good approach and his very science-based. I think his diet recommendations are great. Lane Norton is a great dude who everything he says, he backs up, right? Brad Schoenfeld is, one of the greatest muscle researchers in the entire world. Don Layman on, protein metabolism. Guys like that. I hated Lane Norton at first, and then I kind of came around, and it's why I actually had like a short interaction with him over email because I told him that I use carbon and I liked his products. And he said that's kind of like the usual thing, is that people like initially hate him and then like, oh no, you know what? He actually makes a lot of sense. And it's because what he's saying is uncomfortable truths to people who don't want to hear it, right? When he says keto isn't optimal for building muscle, and he says, let's say, obesity is an independent risk factor, what they're hearing is if you do keto, you'll never make gains and you're a bad person, right? And then when you say obesity is an independent risk factor, what people hear is you're fat and you're a bad person. No, we're just saying this is unhealthy. So that's why every single time I see somebody who's overweight trying to make a diet change, full encouragement. Everything I can to encourage that person to just do it a little bit better, I'm all about it. And if they say, hey, I went up and I walked my mailbox today, great. Do that, keep doing that. You're doing fantastic. Keep up the great work. We need more of that. But yeah, so I guess that kind of gets into, who do you find to be the best source of information on YouTube that doesn't just peddle sexy bullshit to get you to buy their supplements?
Yeah, that's the ones you mentioned are really good. And I think they all have their blind spots.
Sure.
And this is where if someone is really science-based, they will be willing to admit when they're wrong, and they will be willing to, get feedback on where they maybe messed up in the past and where they could do better. And they're willing to adjust their opinions over time as new information comes out. And that's something that is really not easy to do.
Mhm.
And the bigger your following is, the more difficult that is.
Yeah.
Because let's say you have like 10 followers or something, you get new information and you're like, oh, fuck, that video I put out last week, I wasn't quite right. Well, I mean, it's easy to sort of do a 180 because you only have a small following watching your stuff. But some of these guys have, millions of people following them. And so it's really, really hard to say that, hey, oh, well, I used to believe this for these reasons. Now I believe this for these reasons. And I've changed my opinion. And the stuff that I said before was either not quite 100% right or it was completely fucking wrong. And that's a tough conversation to have, especially when people look at you as an quote unquote expert or someone who, has their shit together or knows everything. And I think it's important to realize that even if someone is science based, that almost necessarily means that they're going to be changing their opinion on a lot of stuff.
Mhm.
Even stuff like 5 years ago. I mean, if someone has not changed their opinion in the last 5 years with regards to exercise science, they're probably not science based. They're probably science light or just pretending to use science because there's a whole bunch of stuff that has changed. Studies come out all the time where it's like, maybe the length and position of training the muscle is important, or maybe volume is not that important, or maybe it is more important, or maybe it's situational, this kind of stuff. So there's always new information coming out. And, I spend several hours a day just keeping up to date with that kind of stuff. And that's not all going through PubMed, but a lot of it is just podcasts, Stronger by Science, Greg Nuckols and Eric Drexler, really good source there. Iron Culture with Omar Isuf and Eric Helms, and they all have guests sometimes.
Yeah.
Those are really, really good sources. And again, all these guys they've shown that they're willing to update their opinions, which for me, that is huge.
Mhm.
If someone is like clinging to their beliefs when their beliefs are clearly outdated or not quite accurate, if they're just like pulling a Ripito, for me, that it really degrades their credibility as a source. Right. Because, hey, maybe the trap bar is actually a very useful tool. It might not be a straight bar, but like, does that really matter that much? Maybe it has advantages. And so, there are some people who are sort of stuck in the past and they're unwilling or unable, maybe both, to update their opinion. And so when I see that, it's not that I don't look at them as a valid source anymore. It's just that I realize that I tend to consume other sources above them. And, Menno Henselman's another really, really good science-based guy. And Jeff Nippard, Sean Nalawani, Alpha Destiny. And again, all these guys are willing to update their opinions. And that's probably the biggest thing, along with being humble and, not selling out, which does happen quite a bit. And, you just have to sort of put in the work and stay up to date with the information and, try to provide the best information to your audience on a consistent basis. I would say those are the biggest things, as well as not being dogmatic, not, again, blindly following some system or some protocol or some way of thinking, because with a lot of these things, there's actually quite a bit of flexibility.
Mhm.
In terms of building muscle, there's a lot of ways you can go in terms of frequency, in terms of rep range, in terms of exercise selection, volume. There's lots of things you can do and paths you can take and still get to the same spot. Plus, again, it's very individual anyway. So I would say anyone who doesn't show quite a bit of nuance with the recommendations, it's a big red flag to me. And when someone speaks in absolutes, when they're like, oh, always do this or never do this, unless it's like something really, really obvious, like never shit your pants in the gym. All right, fair enough. Like not many
Science-based.
advantages. Yeah, that's not aware of any research, but but I would say, yeah, not a good idea. Definitely not going to help your gains or help you score with the hot chick who is your gym crush. Trust me, I've tried. Does not work very well at all. Um, but generally speaking, notice how I said generally speaking.
Mm.
Speaking in absolutes is not a great idea. And if someone does it a bunch, or if it's like this is the best exercise, or this is the best way, or never do this, or this exercise will kill your gains, or this is Snap City. To me, it's a no dog. Like it's a big turn off, especially if I see it a bunch. I'll just stop watching their content, right? And if people ask me, oh, what do you think of this channel or something? I'll go to their content. I'll watch a little bit, and for I would say 90% of channels or social media people, it doesn't take long until there's a yeah, I don't know about that dude moment where they
Yeah.
say something and it doesn't even necessarily need to be wrong, but often it's just how they phrased it. It's how they said it, right? It was just a little bit too confident or a little bit too aggressive with the marketing. Like, oh, you got to do this exercise. Do they though? Like, do they really need to do this exercise? Maybe not. And so it's really rare that I get sent, an influencer or social media fitness person where, I watch more than a few minutes of their content and I'm like, all right, here we go. And then, I keep watching and like, damn, like this is legit. And then the guys I mentioned, they're ones who I either never or almost never or very rarely have a moment where I'm like, yeah, I don't know, that was a bit much, or like, yeah, can you find a study for that, or like, can you back that up with even logic, that kind of thing. So yeah, by now I can assess content as well as content creators pretty effectively and efficiently, but it does take quite a bit of practice before you can do it. Like if it was a topic that I didn't know much about, you don't know what to look for. You don't know those red flags to really check. And so it's either very difficult or just straight up impossible.
Yeah. And if you don't know, like you said, what you're looking for, you're just not going to be able to tell who's peddling you BS or not. And generally these experts like Brad Schoenfeld or Don Layman, these guys who are like the world's best researchers in their field, they don't say anything sexy. So when you listen to them, you're not going to hear, oh, this is the only way. You know what they're going to say? Well, it depends. Yeah, likely this is the outcome. You should probably do this. It's not, it's so funny because they're not charlatans, so they don't sell something. And it just sounds very boring when you listen to them, but they're saying, what the research says. But, you can go listen to some of the carnivore zealots or, maybe, I want to say like flexible dieting zealots, plant-based people, and they're going to tell you something completely different, but it sounds sexy because it's absolute. And they say, if you just do this, you will get this. And the even funnier part about this is that if you don't get the results and you bring that up to them, then it's just, you weren't carnivore enough. You weren't plant-based enough. You didn't train hard enough.
They'll gaslight their audiences to where they can't change their mind because the type of audience that they attract doesn't either isn't capable or just isn't ready to think in that way. Where it's like, okay, well, maybe this could be right, maybe this could also be right. And if someone is legit, at least in my book, they'll sound kind of wishy-washy when they're speaking. They're like, this might but I'm not willing to commit to this. Like if you listen to Eric Trexler speak about something, it's very rare that he's like, yeah, I'm like really certain that this is a thing. Often he's like, yeah, I don't know if I'm willing to actually commit to this. It's possible, might be, but we just don't really have the body of evidence to see. And normies will hear that and just be like, I'm out. Like, this is just tell me the answer, man. Like, what do I do? Like, how many carbs should I eat or not eat a day? Tell me the superfoods, bitch. Like that kind of thing. But like, yeah, again, the more legit someone is, the more they're like, I guess this is true. Probably this is true. This might be true, but we're not sure about this. And it's the reason why there's not that many legit. It doesn't even need to be science-based. Like I wouldn't really consider myself to be science-based because I say a lot of stuff that is anecdote, either from myself or from clients or just observationally. And so I'm like science-based kind of, but often not. And I try to make it clear when I am science-based and also clear when I'm not science-based. But some people will blend those two to where they have this sort of this demeanor of being science-based. Maybe it's on their channel banner, like, oh, putting the science, putting the strength back in science or science back in strength or whatever. And, may or may not be Jeff Cavalier's banner, but, they don't cite studies. They don't actually, they're not really science-based, but they're science-based enough to put that off, even if they're not really. And beginners love science. They love that word. If a workout is science-based, fantastic, but like that isn't always something that can actually be science-based, right? Like you have an EMG research that says this biceps curl is better than this one. Trouble is the EMG is not always like the best indicator of, oh, how good is this exercise versus this one.
Right.
And some channels, they push that science. Like Jeff Nempert's really, really good. He's like actually science-based and he's actually a really big channel, but most other big channels, they're like science light because again, to get big, often you need like really flashy content or speaking in absolutes. And so, Jeff is really an inspiration because, no one else has really gotten to that 1 million plus YouTube subscriber count while actually being science-based. You have Etienne who is like, like he pushes the science thing really hard, but he's, if you look at a lot of what he actually does, it's over interpretations or, it's misinterpreting studies or it's just reading the abstract, that kind of thing. And so science can be a powerful marketing tool, but actually using science is a lot of homework and it's really difficult. And it's not as sexy as it usually looks in a thumbnail.
Right. Well, I want to be respectful of your time, and I got to get rock and rolling here shortly. I will ask you one of the two questions I normally ask all my guests as soon as we get rolling out here. What does health look like to you?
I actually really liked Mike's answer to this. So I guess I'll just steal that and kind of put my own twist on it.
Sure.
I think his answer, if I recall correctly, was like being able to do whatever you want to do as long as possible or something. So it's not like running a marathon. It's not bench pressing a superhuman amount of weight. It's just waking up every day and being able to do what you want to do. And so, injury avoidance is a big part of that. Like I had a quadratus lumborum issue, a QL issue, which I've been dealing with for the past month or so. Getting injured is not healthy. It kind of sucks because it impacts what you can do. Like the next day, you're sort of like, you're trying to put on your shoes, but you don't have that range of motion. So I'm trying to like loop my sock over my toes because I can't get all the way to like actually just put my fucking sock on like a normal human being. So I'm trying to like loop it over my toes and I have to get all 5 toes because if you can't like, now you have 1 toe out of the sock and it doesn't work. I'm trying to like loop it over all 5 toes to where I can actually, and if I bend too far forward, then my back fucking hurts. Oh. It's not a back, it's like a deep abdominal muscle around the lower back. And, finally I get my shoes on, then walking, I have to like brace my abs to walk normally for the first, 2 weeks, that kind of thing. And it sucked, right? Like that's not health, right? Like trying to maximize your lifts. At a certain point, it's not really for health. Same with body fat percentage. Going too low, not for health. 12%, fair enough. 10%, I don't know. Like, what's healthier at 10% compared to 12%?
Right.
Good luck finding information on there. The 99th percentile of the general population is already around 14%. So if you're 14%, you're leaner than 99-ish% of people.
Right.
And so, is getting down to 8% really about health? Absolutely not. It's just aesthetics, vanity, maybe business if someone is in the fitness industry. Usually it's not about women because they don't typically like super shredded physiques anyway. So same thing with going up in body fat. So you usually want moderation when it comes to health. So you want a flexible but moderate diet, nothing crazy, nothing super low in calories, nothing super high. Same thing with sleep. You don't want to be sleeping all day or not sleeping at all.
Yeah.
Calories, diet, exercise, pretty much everything, I would say taking a moderate approach is going to be best for health, where you're not cutting out any food or macronutrient. You're able to live not necessarily as long as possible, because if you want to optimize longevity, now you have to in some ways sacrifice other areas, which might not be worth it. But I would say at least a decent amount of longevity is a nice goal to have. And then, being able to essentially not have your body be a limiting factor. I would say that is the biggest thing. Not having this physical shell that holds up our brains be something you have to worry about. If you wake up in every day and you're you're worrying about what you have to do or how you're going to get through the day, I would say that's not healthy. Whether it's because you're morbidly obese or because you're 7-8% body fat and you have to plan out all your meals and really be restrictive and on top of things, either extreme is not going to be healthy because it's something that's taking away from other areas of your life. And trying to find that balanced approach is going to be the best way for most people.
Right. I completely agree. I wish we could go longer. Like I said, I got a little bit of a tight cutoff. Dude, we should absolutely do this again. I really enjoyed this conversation and I enjoy the hell out of your content. Where can everybody find you? And we will get out of here.
Cool. Yeah, it's just my name, Geoffrey Verity Schofield, GeoffreyVer, and then it'll auto-complete technology. And I'm on Instagram, YouTube, Quora, and that's about it. I'll mess around with TikTok and Facebook, maybe eventually, but not at the moment.
Well, we'll have to get into TikTok next time because I feel like I could go on an hour about that. I don't even have one, but it's not good when it comes to fitness stuff. So thank you for coming on, dude. And like I said, we'll have to do this again. And hopefully everybody enjoyed. Subscribe, like, share, whatever you're going to do. Check out Axe and Sledge supplements. Use code Matovcik10 at checkout if you need a discount. And until next time, everybody, take care.